Okay, I'm going to talk about a project we started 4 years ago, actually in this very region we are now, and it's more actually about the region than in the region. It's about a fictive suburb we created, and it all started, it's almost 8 years ago when I decided to leave Austria towards Bratislava, and I went by train from the nowadays not anymore existing Südbahnhof in Vienna. And I took the route, which is like, you can see the Danube, on the left is Vienna, on the right is Bratislava. And as you maybe know, there's like 2 train connections between Bratislava and Vienna. One is like in the north, which leads via Maacheck, and one is in the south, which crosses Hochkanderleit and Pizza and then enters Bratislava in Petroschalka. So I took the northern option, and I was a bit surprised by the fact that the surroundings are pretty much rural, and everything is rural until you end up in Stadlnova, which is quite urban, with panel houses and everything, but there's actually not much of a sign that the area between Vienna and Bratislava increases in terms of development. Like there's not much sign of suburbanization either from Vienna side, or maybe more from Vienna side of course, but definitely not from the side of Bratislava towards the Austrian border. But also like, this is according to what the mayor explained before. Anyway, I found it a bit strange, and I got really interested in this region, and I went to explore it a bit. And there's this Austrian border town of Maacheck, which is pretty interesting because it was actually founded in medieval times by the Czech king Ottokar Przemysl II. And he founded quite a lot of cities, but the interesting thing is actually Maacheck was then, this was like in 1268, when he founded the castle plus the city, which is a rectangular structure, more or less like this axis. And he wanted to make it a kind of fortress against Hungary in this sense, and he wanted it to do, like the idea, or the what turned out to be a utopia, was actually to make it the biggest city of nowadays Eastern Austria. But nowadays Maacheck has like 3,000 inhabitants, even though it's a city, and there's not much that reminds you of the city apart from the really massive town wall you can see here. And the very thing you can see here is one of the gates, or one of the former gates. This is the Vienna gate, which leads actually towards Vienna, which opens the city towards Vienna, and it's in quite good condition. There's like the Ungartor, which is hardly to recognize as a gate. And I found it a bit characteristic, also reflecting maybe the relation of the city towards the Slovak neighbors and towards Vienna, or the country, the Austrian countryside surrounding it. And then there is these visions that are created between, be it like the 2 cities, Vienna and Bratislava, which is the twin city concept, which is sometimes promoted, and people say, yeah, this is the twin city, there's lots of collaboration going on, and it's all flourishing. And when you check some internet sites, like the website of, like official website of Bratislava for visitors, it's really kind of enthusiastic about this twin city model, but in the end when you ask people like twin city what's happening, there's actually not much happening in most cases, I would say. So one of these is like the twin city model, in part by the close proximity of Bratislava and Vienna, holds unbelievable hidden potential. Well, hidden. That the twin city area of Vienna Bratislava will enjoy great success in terms of competition as a production locality with other European agglomerations if it strengthens further its economic integration and the forces of both cities are united. Evidently the forces of both cities are anything but united, and that's probably why there's not much happening on this kind of upper level. Nevertheless, these concepts are still spread, and we use it for marketing purposes mainly, or for maybe facilitating meetings between the two mayors of the cities. So, according to this vision, maybe the connection between Vienna and Basel is with twin city liners cruising between the cities and beautiful Panelaki growing on the Austrian side and Bratislav all around. Yeah, this is not happening. There might be reasons which are not that concrete maybe, but then we started to wonder what is actually preventing this flourishing, or that something would develop also from the bottom up and people would start to be active, like this mayor, for example. And why isn't there more initiatives like this? And then we thought maybe it's also sometimes people tend to rely more on this kind of top-down ideas, but somehow they don't arrive, and maybe there's a bit of a lack of imagination what could be. I think we of course thought like this Austrian writer Robert Musil wrote this massive novel, The Man Without Qualities, and then it's also very much about the region, but also very much about this time when just everything was collapsing before the wars, and Austro-Hungarian Empire was just before its collapse, and he created this idea of this man who has developed a sense of the possible, and he defines the sense of possibility. Like the man who is endowed with the sense of possibility won't say, for instance, he happened, will happen, must happen such and such things, but he'll imagine you could, should happen such and such things. And when he's told that a thing is just like it is, he thinks that it could as well just be different. And we thought maybe that's a bit what was lacking here. Like we kind of think, okay, it could also be another way around, or we could also try it like this, or we could also swim to the Slovak shore to have a beer or something like this. Then we created this idea of what we call Stadlnova, which is actually kind of a mashup between the Vinskanoves, which is like the westernmost suburb of Bratislava, and Stadlau, which is like the eastern edge of Vienna. And thereby we wanted to create a sort of platform to deal with questions which we thought are not really being posed or dealt with in between the two cities. And we thought kind of a fictive suburb is quite the right thing, because then you don't risk a lot and you don't necessarily become very concrete in the sense that you can still keep this shape of an idea in itself. Also according to this, what could be, yeah, and what is not very manifested in a material sense. But Stadlnova, of course, is not this very flourishing suburb. We thought it should more reflect this reality in between two cities, so maybe it's a bit more of showing features of the periphery, and that's what we also thought is maybe more interesting than these abstract visions about economic growth. That was now how we described Stadlnova. So as a fictive suburb somewhere between Bratislava and Vienna, where marginalized aspects of the cities, the region, and all the in-betweens are being researched and confronted. So that was also very important for us, like, to kind of create a space where certain features of the cities, but also like people from Bratislava and Vienna or the region in between could like meet, and also certain aspects could be confronted, because we thought this is kind of missing a sort of public sphere between the two cities. So the idea was then to unfold the space of the possible between here and there, center and periphery, growth and recession, archaeology and utopia. So this was also like some aspects we wanted to deal with in the frame of this project. So how we started was we made a call. We had this idea of organizing two workshops, one in Stadlau, like in this Viennese suburb, and the other one in Divinskano West. And we wanted to invite like a group of people who are from different fields, and who then would be invited to interpret this idea of Stadlnova in their own way. So there was, in the end, some people who were anthropologists, some architects, artists, you can imagine. So, and of course, it was people from here and there. So there was Austrians, like 10 Austrians and 10 Slovaks who were participating, and we had 2 weekends, and we organized these workshops right in the suburbs. So you can see a picture of the one workshop we did in Stadlnova, and the idea was also to give people a glimpse of what it could be, like this idea. So we invited other people who would tell, for example, facts about these suburbs, tell things about history, and on the other hand we invited people who had more like this kind of fictive dimension they took care of. For example, there's this Austrian writer who is living in Stadlnova already for 10 years, Martin Leidenforst, and I think he's really doing an amazing job. Like he's writing about the region. Like he's one of the only people who are really kind of comprehending it as a region, as one region, and he's also writing for One Slovak Weekly. And yeah, so we invited him, and he told about this suburb of Stadlnova. This is the housing estate of writers and poets, because it's the only housing estate where every street is named after a Slovak writer or a poet. And here you can actually see the very border region, like very close to the river Morava, which is also here, and it's like where you have these bunkers, which are still remaining from like First World War time. So this is what I just told. Like this, we had this 3-day workshops. Like it was a weekend, and like one here, one there, and we also tried to reinforce this fictive dimension, and the people would also start to imagine a bit, and not only be depressed by the dry reality they would encounter. So there we went a lot like through the suburbs, but of course like 3 days is not a lot of time, which is probably better to have a bit more time. Also we had only 1 week in between these workshops, so people were kind of, time-wise under a bit of pressure maybe to develop ideas, and then like, there was not maybe enough time to reflect upon what you actually experienced and to develop maybe concepts, yeah. But anyway, nevertheless, there was like, as I said, like around 20 participants, and most of them, in fact, they developed their own approach and their own project, inspired by what they saw, what they experienced. Like here you can see in Stadlnova, in this Viennese suburb, there's actually quite massive urban development going on, with a whole new district which is supposed to like marketed as the future of urbanism and urban living, and which is called Seestadt Aspern, and a lot of people are projecting ideas onto it, and I don't know what's the current state, but I think many people already lost a lot of ideas as well with it. So it's quite a complicated process, but it's being built, and in fact they also want to attract people from Bratislava to live there, and there's even a students' housing complex being established. And then we asked, do you have a website also in Slovak? Of course we don't have. So yeah, the usual regional stories. And this was not that we forced people to carry these Stadlnova signs. It was voluntary. Urban experiments, like of course they were gardening there, and people were really wow. But in the end, like, who wants to live at the very edge of Vienna? So it's not really urban yet. Yeah, Stadlnova, like maybe lifting up somewhere else. I don't know if this was very clear what I was talking or what I meant, or if you have already some question. And I want to show you like a few projects like within Stadlnova. Is the idea kind of clear? Because it's not so concrete. Like of course it's like more in the clouds than in the river. But, yeah. Okay, so maybe I'll show you one project. Which was developed by a Slovak visual artist, Ludmila Vanakova. She's like now based in Košice, where she's also from. And she actually did a project about this kind of personal ads people put, for example, in these boards, you have like boards, and you put an ad like you lost your cat, or you give a cat away, or something like this, or whatever. And things like she collected these personal ads, like in the Viennese suburb as well as in the Bratislava suburb, and she exchanged these ads. So she kind of infiltrated these ads, like Slovak ads, in the Vienna suburb and the other way around. And then she asked people to please read these ads in a language which was not their native one. So then like Austrians would read Slovak as Radové Mačku, and I think this was a very nice, created a very interesting picture about different demand structures and also how you communicate certain things. And she documented it on the one hand like by taking photos of the ads she put, but then on the other hand also she made sound recordings of people reading these ads. So I just want to show you a few of these photos now, and also what people read in their not native language. I hope you can hear it.
Predam traje kuzi, plechove sudi a prezna procno liatina. Predam novi elmotor 10 kW, telefon C0903 045 995. Garten und Kleinreparatur Helfer Gartenarbeit von A zu Bewässerung Kleinreparatur rund Haus und Garten, langjährige Erfahrung Handy 0676,6577895.
Malvonie, Stirkowiani, Partei, Rekonstrukcja, Putov, Kwadlimpie, Rüschklo, Super, Sveno, Oblikia, Spuma, Terro, 0918129495.
Übernehme für Sie Ihre Bugelarbeit, Rechnung nach Stadtbesitzer, nach persönlicher Vereinbarung. Telefon 0664 646280.
Predam Svačiarski, Nož, Vaktorinoj, Tvorfunkčka, Cepele, 9 cm, Poljska, Vivka, Sidlo, Putna, Nočnič, Očvarač, na konverfi a flašče, Skrutkovač, Pinčeta, Spradlo, Vhodný do auta, Pirody, Selena, Farbe, Novi, Sena, Po, Slave, 23 €, Kontakt 0904539886.
Fleißige Frau sucht Arbeit, Hans, Halt, Putzen, Bugen, nur seriöse Anrufe. Tel 0650 342 3241.
Okay, so this was one project, and maybe another one which is more recent. I think that I developed last year, because last year, 2013, was officially 20 years of diplomatic relations between. A little intro. Maybe. Or maybe not. Okay, so no intro. Anyway, last year was 20 years of, on one hand, like Slovak Republic, and 20 years of thereby diplomatic relations between Austria and Slovakia. But apart from that, it was also 10 years of what Martina mentioned before, like this artificial creation called Zentrope, which is a region, construct of a region which kind of encompasses like Brno, Dieu, Vienna, and Bratislava. And the thing with Zentrope is that it's very obviously not really that people identify with. it's more like this kind of artificial thing, and some people use it for their purposes. And I once talked to a researcher on he's researching about this kind of regional development project, and he says it's like it's actually bad, Synthrope, and it was only designed to help the interests of very narrow groups of people and very kind of narrow dimension industries. So you have this kind of automotive cluster, for example, and then you have Synthrope and say, yeah, okay, like this is the region and this is a lot of future, but it doesn't really arrive at people, and of course it's not really designed to change the everyday of people here and kind of respond to their demands and their needs. So it was also like the celebration, or not celebration, of 10 years of Synthrope last year. And the funny thing is, like, Synthrope kind of started to live again, but only virtually, and there was a new, not only virtually, of course, there's things happening, but they don't arrive very much at people, as I already said. And the thing is, they actually created a thing which was called the Synthrope Vision of 2013, which was kind of containing certain steps that have to be achieved in the region. And it sounded really very abstract, and it was like very hard for me to imagine that anybody in the region would read this on one hand, and then that anybody in the region would have the idea to really implement things like that. So what I did, I connected it with the story of a friend from Bratislava who in the early 90s went by bike to Hamburg to buy an electronic device, he couldn't buy in Bratislava back then, it was not so easily available. He wanted just to buy a Walkman, and he went to Hamburg to this store of electro stuff, and he bought a Walkman, and then he went back. And the thing is, okay, 1993 was also the time when a certain music genre started to be popular, like this kind of, which is associated with Eurodance. Like we have a lot of these bands that were around, either on the Slovak side or on the Austrian side. But there was one song which I found really very characteristic for maybe what should have happened between the two countries. The song is called Let's Come Together by The Beloved. It's quite annoying actually, but it sounds like a manifesto for Austria and Slovakia to unite. It's like, let's come together right now, oh yeah, in sweet harmony. And I thought, wow, like, why don't these Synthrope guys use a song like this, or just make it a bit more approachable for people? So I took the song, and I took the Synthrope vision and packed it into a karaoke version of this song, which is maybe a thing that is more approachable for people. So I'm gonna play now this karaoke video, and maybe you can already sing along. And it's a mix of lyrics of the original song and elements of this great vision. Of course it's slow because things are developing very slow, if at all. And fertilized. They really use this term, it's amazing. Yeah, it's original vision material. Interculturally. Let's come together right now. Oh yeah. In sweet harmony. Let's come together. Yeah, you can imagine the rest.
So we need to learn the song first, and then we can join you.
For sure,
right?
on the ferry, most probably.
Yeah.
So these were like 2 examples, and there's some more projects which were either done by other people who participated in the workshops, but there was also people who joined at a later stage and also had their idea, just realized you cannot find it on the website, which is so like Stadlnova.net. And if you have any idea and you want to contribute in a very sweet way or not sweet, it's very welcome. And if you have any questions, same. Thanks for your attention. And I'm glad you're actually doing this workshop.
Yeah, that you do, because at first I didn't know about your project or anything, but then that next year was like, oh, don't you know Jürgen, he's doing this and this, and then you start to know, I feel like, I don't know, I don't know you, it's maybe because, the projects are more like...
Yeah, also Stadlnova is not on Facebook.
Also, it's not about Facebook.
No, but I think like, according to the way how things spread and how ideas or projects spread, it's like, to be off Facebook is be very
it's already an alternative, I would say, that if you're off Facebook, and it actually was a big question of the last night for me, if I should make a Facebook webpage of this project in order to promote this, or not. Maybe this is a good platform to ask, like, guys, would you like to have a Facebook event informing about this workshop at the exhibitions or not? How do you feel? Like, should this project and the exhibitions communicate through own way, or should the Facebook kind of help this? How do you feel? Okay, maybe we can talk about it later, but the point is that what I liked about this project, that it's more your workshop, or I would say platform of thinking is about the fiction. It's about which then after about come to the reality, or they are confronted with the reality. The big words of the promoters, of the investors, are confronted with the small realities, and on according of the small realities, you create the own fictions, which are more interplays between the small realities.
True.
Which I particularly liked.
But one factor is for sure also like this kind of pocket scale utopia or dystopia ideas that we thought there's no space for that, also because in fact, of course now be it in artistic circles or generally there's the kind of a revival of utopia as a concept, but actually when you just dig a bit deeper and research about utopia for the city of Bratislava, you don't stumble upon much. There's not much to find, which is kind of linked to this concept of utopia. And of course, like when you dig in the history of Vienna, you can find much more. But in fact, nowadays there's not much that comes close to utopia for the region or for these 2 cities. So this was what we also thought, like to kind of create this space for pocket utopia.
It's a question like, what is the connection between utopia and the vision? And in this sense, Bratislava never had a certain vision, and there were always there are lost layers of a group of citizens which were there. If we go more into the history, it was the German citizens, there were the Jewish, there were the Hungarian, and now after the Second World War, we are sitting here now, but the state tried to create some more homogenic place, and then there were smaller visions for certain city parts. But to speak about some vision which would connect diverse regions, such as in this project of the border, is all can either, if we speak about the strategic point of view, can either go into monoliths, which then try to melt differences or oversee them, or is trying to generalize that much that some kind of growth is se rozpadává do takých malých kúskov.
Yeah, and certainly you also need a certain drive, like people have to really want it, and this is, I think is very often lacking here, like not so like this kind of study and not so
Whatever.
like if it's not clear what is the very outcome, I would claim that it's quite similar on the side of Austria than like on the side of Slovakia. Like people are hardly develop any enthusiasm for it. It's usually pragmatic ideas are of course easier to grasp, but it's maybe not a lack of pragmatic ideas. I think there's plenty. Of course, it's also a lack of ideas that are in fact being realized. Yeah, but maybe you should think a bit further sometimes.
I think we are not in the time of utopias. We are more in a pragmatic way of evolving a system which works
For some.
very on Earth. So I think this utopia idea, I mean, it's hard to do a dystopia, an opposite of an utopia, a dystopia. So even these dystopias we can't imagine. So,
but I think it's for people now it's far easier to imagine a zombie apocalypse than a region flourishing between Vienna and Bratislava. What I thought, like it's like this dystopian things seem more approachable. Maybe now, I don't know.
maybe a little, but even this I think we are losing. So
even
it's hard to believe in a future which is differently than the present.
Yeah.
So it's just we're
People
working
are
on
caught
and
in the
on.
present.
Yeah. So it's quite hard to develop something, which means more than that what we have.
Or something different. Yeah. Sure. Yeah.
I'm thinking about the way you said that it's hard to imagine future which would be something else than the present, like something with like presence which has something more. But I'm asking myself if it has to do something with the present times as that, or is it just a general feature of a presence that you have actually no idea how it's going to work, anyway. But because it's maybe also about the communication. Like there's this Palm project which we just shortly mentioned, but it's this development project of urbanization which Bratislava and the mayors of the smaller Gemeinden should work on. And actually this should kind of plan the further development of the region according to the potentials and the features of the place. And the current state, like unofficial information I have, is that they are in a great delay of time because the Slovak side is not communicating with the Austrian side what they want to do, and they're not paying attention to their notes they have. So some mayors of Austria want to leave the project because their notes haven't been worked into the plan. So the future imaginable, or let's say the plan one can imagine to work on, is not possible without some kind of communication and expectations, of course.
Yeah, and then also thinking about this very area south of the Danube, around like Kitze and Berg, and there's actually happening what we thought that's lacking. Like there's the confrontation. Like Slovaks are moving to Austrian villages, But on the other hand, like, maybe there is still a lack of a space of reflection upon that, you know, and what are the consequences on a very personal level for people, and but things are really happening, but then again, like, it's maybe in many cases not really coordinated and not according to very broad visions, yeah. So it's just happening due to pragmatic reasons again, like land is cheaper on the Austrian side, and okay, go there, yeah, sure.
One other thing which occurred to me now is how can you build up some kind of profit or identity upon the border? And I once found out about a village called Bildain. Maybe you know about it, or you
What is it called?
Bildain. It's close to Sopate.
Yeah, sure. Mm-hmm.
And
I have this festival also.
you've been there also?
No, not at festival.
Okay, I think actually it would be great to go there, because that village is actually one of those. It's the southern of Burgenland, and it's, I think, to compare that part of the border villages with this part of the border villages is very interesting, because they don't have a big city close to them. So on one hand they don't have the struggle, and on the other hand, but they don't have the development. I knew about this village, but your article you mentioned, Maurizio, from the Standard reminded me of this. The village has also large investigation problems, but they decided to build some kind of tourism of the border, like border tourism. They have a walk, experience of what the border is in a more general way, and what did it mean to go through the Iron Curtain, and also and so on. But so they're kind of really building up their identity based upon this, small touristic paradise, if we could go to these lengths to say that. But if we stop to think about the border and we just think about the connection to the big cities, it's also the conflict of peripheria versus the center of development.
You mentioned this case also, Bratislava and
Exactly, as we were also told today, like if Bratislava wouldn't be in this region as a Umkreis of Wojewódzkie, the situation of Zaworska would have been much different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's exactly like the mayor said, like, at the end, that the question is if they want it, exactly, like here, to develop maybe in a similar way, like in the south. And this is a very crucial question, I think. And I think it's also already reflected in the fact that we actually don't have a bridge which is like working all year long. Like we have this one bridge which is Moravski Sveti Jan and Hohenau, which is, you can pass it, I don't know, on average it's like 10 months, and the other 2 months there's like water, floody times, and you cannot pass the bridge. So of course people cannot take stable jobs, like Slovaks could not work on a stable base on the Austrian side. And also it's not possible to commute, And thanks to Chuck Norris, there is a pedestrian bridge.
Yeah. Chuck Norris did it. Nothing else to add? Comments, remarks?
I mean, there are a lot of local questions and small questions, but maybe for me the big question is, how can I believe in anything I don't see or feel? And this construct of Europe, Central Europe, European Union is a kind of construct like every other state. But a state means to know I am Austrian or I am Slovakian. But this I am European is something you can't touch. I'm not a Greek or a French. You don't feel it. So.
It's the next level of the topic. It's not the level on the horizontal level, the board of it, also on the vertical level. Like what is this more common word which should or would connect? And it was also, I think, wonderfully visible on the karaoke version of Didio. There was this kind of European newspeak, how to melt things together, and.
But then you have people, for example, be it Austrians coming to Slovak side to enjoy a cheap but nice beer due to pragmatic reasons, and they're actually acting more according to a European vision and unconsciously. Yeah. So basically, if there's incentives, probably,
you will do it.
It's very crucial, and you don't care about,
I would say like this is also, or at least from my personal view, I see this also as a starting point for people who share nationalist views, and they oppose exactly this. You know, they say like, why the European Union is not doing any good because it erases the differences without any particular reason behind it, that they should respect the differences, be it imaginary or real, right? And in this sense, it's also one response to that, which is also says a lot about the state. Like, what do you define as yours and as yours as a group, and what is kind of individual and can be then mixed together and mashed up in a different way. And I would say the more you need some manifestations flowing, the more you go for this general European newspeak, you know?
Yeah, because you need to write applications for grants.
Exactly. It is also a very, very funny moment, also this project on how to present it to get some money for, you know, like...
We were also using the newspeak, of course, because we also applied for a grant and we needed a grant to finance like the workshop and everything. So yeah, so this was maybe also a kind of influence on me.
Yeah. Like, if it's now, the question I'm dealing with is that I would like to apply for a grant for this project, but it seems that the project will take part, as like you guys would have the chance, and you probably will be working on that region. Seems not to be enough to get the project funded. You know, that in a certain way, the grant sees some practical outcome out of it for the region, which is on one hand understandable for me, but on the other, like, yeah, come on, if you would like to support, you know, the general artistic happening, why it's not enough. But I don't say that to them, I'm just asking myself.
It's not really workshop in most cases.
Yeah.
For example, you don't have some whatever institution that would offer the opportunity to apply for micro grants, for example, for people, young people who want to realize projects in the region. That's not existing at all, and I think that would maybe be a key thing to arrange, and just make this idea more approachable, and also means to get stuff going. Yeah? Sometimes.
You mean like now? Yeah, I think there's a solution to that. So, yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to the region.